Hello and welcome back. Lesson 4 has to do with making decisions in our applications, and I showed you in the first little video of this lesson is we can use if statements. I also wanted to show you something called select case. I find this very handy, and a lot of times it's a lot cleaner than using a bunch of if statements, so I wanted to make sure you knew how to do this. This stuff is in chapter 5 of your book, by the way, but this little project here that I call using select case statements does nothing more than grab a person's name, the city that they're in, and the state. Now, the only choices that I'm allowing them to make, as you can see, are California, Oregon, Nevada, Arizona. And the reason for it is this. Depending on the state you put in, I have a message box come up that says the tax rate for Oregon is 6%. If they were to change that, California, hit OK, it shows that it's 8% and so forth. Okay, and I wanted to show you how I'm doing that. You could do this using if statements, something to the effect, if they choose CA, then tax rate equals a certain amount, if they choose OR, tax rate is a different amount. But sometimes it gets a little messy, so I wanted to show you how to do this. And the other thing that I notice on here is I want to show you how to set the default button on your form. Notice that this OK button has a little box around it. What that means is that that button has the focus, and that means as soon as I type in something and I hit enter, it's the same thing as clicking the OK button. So I just want to make sure I show you how to set that. There's a property on the form, and I made a little note here to myself to make sure we know how to do that. Again, we're using the question at the end, are you sure you really want to quit? And if you do, yes. If not, it comes up with another message. Okay, so we'll make sure we go over that again. So let's take a look at our code. I'll go into the code view, open this little thing up. There's no special variables or anything really to set up. I'll show you on the form how to set up this default button. If you go to the properties of the form, not the properties of the button, but the properties of the form, and you come up here to the top, there's a property called accept button. It used to be called default button, but now they call it accept button. And what that means is if I pick one of these, and it knows that I have two buttons on my project, if I pick this one, then that means this is the default, which means if they just hit enter, that's the same thing as clicking OK. There's also a cancel button down here, right here. So if they want to hit escape on the form, that's the same thing as clicking the quit button. Let's check that. I think that works fine. If I hit escape, it says, are you sure you want to quit? Then I say yes. Okay? So both of those are kind of handy and maybe a little faster than using the mouse, but I just want to show you those two properties. Now let's go back and let's take a look and see what this thing does. You'll notice up here I've made two working variables for myself inside this click event. One of them is the sales tax rate, and then the other one is which state they chose, and I just called it state chosen. I chose sales tax rate as a single precision number because it's going to have decimals in it. And then look what I did. I said the state chosen is going to be whatever they typed in the TXT state text box. And I want to make sure, because this is all case sensitive, I want to make sure that no matter whether they type it in lowercase or uppercase, I want my program to work. Alright, so let me show you a little trick. Anytime you want to take what they type in a text box and convert it to all uppercase, you just use the uCase built-in function in VB, and whatever's in parentheses following that gets converted to uppercase. I'm converting it to uppercase, and I'm putting it back in here. Alright? Now, it won't show up uppercase on the screen. Watch. If I type in something here and something here, and I type in CA in lowercase, the program still runs. And the reason that it runs is because I'm not worried about whether they do uppercase or not. My test is going to be based on converting it to uppercase so that I can do a test down here, you'll see. So we're going to take what they put in the text box, convert it to uppercase, and put it in here. There's also a function called LCase, which converts everything to lower. All right? Now let's go down here and look at our select case. I showed you in class that the select case structure or way of programming starts with a select case and has an end select down here at the bottom. All right, make sure you have that or it won't work. And when you type in select case in VB, you have to put right next to this the thing that you want to evaluate. Now what I'm going to evaluate here is this variable, whatever they put in here. And then you just simply add case statements and you tell Visual Basic, well, what do you want this one to be? Well, this one is California, and it's going to be a text string data because that's what I asked them to type in, and I put it in quotes. This is going to test AZ, this one will test NV, and this one will test OR. Now notice, when this says capital C and capital A, it means capital C, capital A. If I hadn't have done this up here, if I hadn't have converted this to uppercase and they type in little ca, this test wouldn't work. The whole thing would fail. All right. So rather than testing whether they typed little ca, little a, capital C, whatever, I just took care of the whole thing in one operation. If they did press California CA, then sales tax is going to be 0.08. Otherwise, on these other states, you can see I just made up a bunch of numbers. All right. Now, what happens if they don't pick one of those? Well, look, we have kind of a catch-all. I don't want to say it's a garbage thing, but it's a catch-all section that takes all the other cases and catches all the things that they might have typed in. They could have just typed in a bunch of gibberish. So what I did was I put in a case else. Now this is there's a space in here. It's a little hard to tell. Case else means if none of these are true, come down here and do this. And what I did, I just put a little message box in, says please put in this. I clear the text box and set the focus back in, and then we exit out of the sub. Okay? If any of these are true, all this will be ignored. The other thing to pay attention to is select case. Once it finds one of these that's true, let's say they typed in AZ, it doesn't do any more testing. That would be kind of a waste of time. So it runs this, it'll run this line, and then right after this line is executed, it jumps to the end select and keeps going. Now, is there anything else to do? Let's look. Yes, there is something else to do. If there were no errors, I'm going to say, let's put up a message box and show them what their tax rate is. And so that's all I've done here. I've just concatenated some strings to put that together. I've said your tax rate for, and then I appended the state that they chose, and then appended is, and then added sales tax rate right here. And it'll come up and say your sales tax rate for California is 0.08. Just a nice little friendly sentence, that's all. Then we clear the text box and set the focus back to the state so they can pick another one. That's how it works. Okay? Let's go up and look and see something here. I want to point out something. You'll notice that up here, if they didn't pick one of these states, I go ahead and clear the text box and I set the focus back there. But my next statement is something that you need to learn about, and that's something called exit sub. You see, I don't want it to come down here and do this. I don't want it to do this because they picked the wrong answer. So one of the ways, it's not always the best way, but one of the ways to avoid running this code down here is to just simply say at this point, come down here and exit the sub. So it'll come down here and it'll bypass all this code. When you say exit sub, it jumps out right away. Okay? Now the other thing I did, just so you could see the difference, this is how you would have to write that select case statements if you were using if statements. And I think you can look at that a little bit and see that looks a little bit messy. It's a little harder to read. It's harder to debug, and it's certainly more tedious to type. And this up here just looks a lot cleaner to me, and that's why you're going to see me use select case statements a lot in the demos we do in class, and not so much if statements. Okay? Now let's see if there's anything else on here I was going to show you. I don't think so. All right, so I think we covered everything on that one. Oh, down here, just to review, I did put my end if statement down here, this box. So again, if they really want to quit and they click the yes button, it's going to close the application. If they didn't, it's going to come down here. It's hard to see, remember. If messagebox.show equals windows.forms. Get over here. Windows.forms.dialogresult.yes, then do something. What this all means, what this all mess means is, did they click the yes button on the message box? And in Visual Studio 5, they're calling message boxes, and all these little boxes that come up, they're calling them dialog boxes. And so even if they just have a couple buttons on them, they're still called a dialog box, and that's where this comes from. Okay? So we'll do one in class together so you can kind of see how it works. It takes a little practice. And the other thing is, I showed you before, put a line continuation character, just do an underscore, and then you can move this down here a little bit, and it's a lot easier to read. Remember our rule, you put an underscore character, there can't be anything after it. There's a space in here, but nothing after it, and then you could break up your lines so that you're not scrolling left and right so much. I think that makes it a lot more readable. Okay? In fact, I'm going to save it like that. All right, good.